Welcome, Strategy Simplified listeners. We're so pleased today to be able to speak with Bhushan Sethi, Joint Global Leader of People and Organization at PwC. Bhushan's a global thought leader in the future of work. He'll share some of the top trends and impact areas in this space. Then we'll dive into how PwC is reacting here, including how the firm thinks about diversity and inclusion, work-life balance, the support, and overall development of its people. I hope you enjoy the discussion. So thank you all so much for joining us today. We are delighted to have such a senior folk be willing to chat with us, talk with us about his work, what he knows, and what he's learning about the future of business and the current state of work in our turbulent environment and the ever-changing environment that we're in, but also some about his firm. And to those of you who are aspiring consultants, some advice and guidance there as well. So would love to just kick us off, Bhushan. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, education, your experience?
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for all the great work you're doing for our profession and bringing in some of our supply chain of talent who are, on this call and others. I live in New York City. As you can tell from my accent, I didn't grow up here. Been living here for 20 years. Been a consultant most of my life. I was raised in the UK, Indian origin, as you could probably tell. My undergrad was in accounting and economics. And after that, I worked and studied at the same time, studied management accounting professional qualification while working a job at a company that was called Boots, is now called Alliance Boots. I worked in their graduate training scheme while also studying management accounting. Through that, I got to learn about strategy and management and got to apply it through a finance function and working in risk and working in industry. And then after that, at the ripe old age of 24, I decided to join a consulting firm, which was PwC at the time. Since then, I've worked at PwC, IBM, Deloitte, and now back at PwC. I obviously love consulting. I love working with clients. I love building teams. I love solving problems. And Lord only knows the world needs more people to take different approaches to solving problems. The pandemic has shown us that, and I'm looking forward to discussing that and all aspects during this session.
Absolutely. I love it. I want to dive into so many different areas of that. Actually, first, though, you laid out what sounds like a more typical path to consulting. So a little bit of business foundation in the choices that you made in education and in your early 20s. But for those listening who don't come from that traditional background, do you feel like there's still a pathway to being in strategy consulting as well?
Yeah, I think consultants in lots of places get a bad reputation for taking your watch and telling you the time and coming up with lots of consulting jargon and us creating our own problems. But if you think about, even if you work at any business, the ability to diagnose a problem and address the root cause of that issue, whether it's a supply chain issue, whether it's a how do we grow our revenue issue, or if it's a how do we implement technology and drive the right adoption and business case savings, it requires the ability to solve problems, root cause diagnose, and come up with solutions that will be sustainable and will drive business benefits. That's what consulting is. I think lots of people in all businesses perform forms of consulting. We just happen to be specialized in firms that work across and have the benefit and the privilege of working across lots of different businesses and applying those lessons learned. So yes, there are good consultants and bad consultants there. There are lazy consultants and, very data-driven, purpose-led consultants. So I think there's a lot of demand around the consulting profession. There's many different forms of consulting. But I think that those skills are very applicable whether you're working in a big company, go on to form a startup, go work in, a public sector or do something completely different. I think there's some very transferable skills, whether you're kind of in consulting for 2 years or 22 years.
Absolutely. And I love that you pointed out that the importance of the diversity of input, the diversity of thought, diversity of background. When we talk through and teach through the case interview process, we talk a lot about how do you layer on insights? How do you provide good analogies and context, even from what you know? You know, you're not going to be an expert in that case that's put in front of you, because you're also not going to be an expert in your first several years on the job when you're put across the table from a client who is a subject matter expert, right? And so that diversity of background experience can actually lend well towards creating diverse teams and diverse trains of thought. So, maybe we pivot from there. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how PwC thinks about its, in terms of your people strategy and diversity, either through the hiring process or how you celebrate that at the firm more broadly. How do you guys think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons why it makes me very proud to be a partner and a leader at PwC is that we have a purpose, and I believe by and large we live our purpose consistently every day. Our purpose is to build trust in society and solve complex problems. And the need for us to have values around care and compassion and driving inclusion in all aspects and equity and building diverse teams and making sure that we're progressing our diverse populations in our company are so important to us. A couple of years ago, we made an even bigger commitment. So obviously, want to recognize that today's the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. But a couple of years ago, we had one of our own consultants shot in his apartment by an off-duty police individual. It really triggered us to focus on this topic of how do we address systemic racism. We galvanized people in our own company. We galvanized other businesses. We created a forum called CEO Action, where we said we've got to address some of these issues as business leaders and address some of the systemic issues. So fast forward a couple of years, over a couple of thousand CEOs have signed on to this pledge. They are sharing actions. They are sharing kind of what they're focusing on. After the terrible murder of George Floyd, we even produced a bigger focus on that, where we had client and our own people dedicate people to addressing some of those systemic issues. And we're now very boldly tackling topics that business in the past never even kind of wanted to go near, around the judicial system, the police system. How do we drive access to credit and housing? All of the issues that address systemic issues. Now, very conscious that the African American population in this case is only one demographic. It's a demographic we're focused on. But when we think about diversity inclusion at PwC, we're focusing on all underrepresented minorities. I'm just highlighting kind of the Black population as one. It's not lost on us that there's a rise of hate crimes across many demographics, whether it's Asian Americans, the anti-Semitism that we've seen even in my hometown of New York, just this last couple of weeks. So wherever we see it, we see our purpose to lead on those topics. We're trying to do that through the work we're doing, the opportunities we're creating for our people. We're trying to be a conscious voice for the business community and try and lead others. And, we'll learn in the same way as everyone else. But I think there's a big focus right now on businesses taking the lead in this area. And I'm very proud of the work we're doing. There's a long way to go, though.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about the Black community. One thing that we've seen you post was that PwC is recently committed to helping start the careers of 25,000 Black and Latinx students by 2026. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to do, we have the fortune of being able to, similar to many businesses, we've had, a good year. and we want to give back. And so one of the ways we wanted to give back is to invest in underrepresented communities and around education. Education, as everyone on this call knows, is the ticket to opportunities in corporations, in corporate America and businesses around the world. So what we're doing is we're pledging $125 million to focus on Black and Latinx students. We're also making a commitment so to focus on their access to education and some of our pro bono activities. We're also making a commitment to hire significant numbers, at the entry level in our firm, whether that's in our assurance business, whether it's in different aspects of our consulting business. So we know that it's very easy for businesses to write checks. There's a lot of check writing that's been done. We're trying to support that with action. In terms of providing voice and some skills around education, but also hiring and creating opportunities for people, which again provides economic opportunity and access to employment.
We know that you at PwC are on the leading edge, cutting edge of a lot of different things, and another one is having the perspective on the future of the post-pandemic workplace, work from home, the shift that's been, the fact of what are the scenarios looking like, and how is it going to feel as we move forward. And you're a thought leader in this space. So could you just share with our audience a little bit more about what you've been learning, what you think some of the main takeaways are in this space?
Yeah, happy to. I'd say some of the key themes that we're seeing, and this was before the pandemic, Stephanie, that the need for businesses to think about their strategy and really understand the external environment and the different scenarios in which they may face themselves. How do they respond to competitive threats when competitors are coming up with innovative technology? How do they deal with geopolitical challenges? How do they deal with resource scarcities or aging populations? So really thinking about those changes. The pandemic is another big scenario around health. Who would have thought that a pandemic would have forced many businesses to go work from home? Who would have thought that, we would have been able to work from home quite successfully for 14, 15 months in a number of services type businesses. So when our clients think about their future of work, it's how do I think about my strategy? How does my strategy stand up and my business model stand up to different scenarios? The pandemic being one, which has obviously impacted heavily those human contact businesses. But it's also other factors to say, how do I responsibly digitize my business? How do I introduce automation and cloud solutions and digital access for my customers and useful productivity tools for my people in a responsible way? How do I build people's skills as well as, digital skills and different leadership skills and skills around newer topics like how we think about climate, how we think about the topic we just talked about around diversity and inclusion? And how do we do that in a different physical workplace? I have the pleasure of being back in my office today, but we know that this hybrid workplace is here to stay, where a number of people in professional services, in consulting, in technology will probably work 2 to 3 days a week. Maybe that goes up or down for certain people based on teams, based on business model, based on preferences. But the ability to be able to work seamlessly from your home location and your office or your client's office is really here to stay. So that workplace design and how we make it experiential when we're in office, and how do we drive the right human connection and collaboration when we're in person, and have the right tools to be productive and included in the conversations and all the work process when we're out of the office is so critical. So for me, having worked on different future of work topics for the best part of 20 years and advised governments and different industries and being part of policy-making teams at the G20 and the World Economic Forum, as well as implementing these in different businesses, these are not new topics. The ability to understand strategy and plan for it, understand the role of technology, and understand your workplace and your workforce. The pandemic is just another scenario. We're going to have other geopolitical shocks. We're going to have other new innovations. We're going to have other different customer buying patterns or different behaviors that we as practitioners in the consulting space have to be mindful of. And we need to again help our clients and their businesses look forward and anticipate some of these to make sure that they are prepared to change.
What were, internally speaking, what were some of these changes that you felt perhaps most challenged the culture that you have at PwC, and what did you do in response to that over the past 16 months?
Yeah. So in our consulting business, we're a very in-person business. We go to our client sites. We travel on planes. We stay in hotels. We whiteboard with our teams and we strategize and we innovate. We've invested in physical space where we apply design thinking, creative techniques, where we've kind of redesigned our offices in that way. That will not go away completely, but some of it will be changed on a semi-permanent basis. So what we've been doing for the last 15 months is been doing all of that from home, using the tools that we have in place, making sure that we're very deliberate to check in with our people, making sure that we're looking for telltale signs of mental health challenges and exhaustion, making sure that we're incenting people to take vacation. We've gone through a learning curve since the start of the pandemic, when it was everybody rolling up their sleeves to get done what you need to do, which is typical in a crisis, through the summer when we're all getting probably pandemic fatigue and Zoom fatigue, because we thought it would be over, through to, the good turn of the year when we all started getting vaccinated and we saw the light at the end of the tunnel. We see now reopening across the country. We'll be reopening more of our offices between now and September. So we were well prepared in terms of our digital tools and our ability to work from home. That doesn't mean we don't crave the interaction with our clients and our colleagues, which I'm happy to say we'll start building up slowly with safety at the core over the next few months, as you've seen many businesses are starting to do some similar things.
Absolutely. And it seems to be changing so quickly at this point in time. With that being said, even a couple years ago, prospective consultants, those applying and wanting to get into the space, they felt like more or less they could have a blueprint of what that would look like for them, right? You would travel a Monday through Thursday schedule at most firms. You would spend a lot of time at the client, a lot of time with your team during the week, and then come home. For those who are looking to potentially apply this fall, imagining themselves in this business, in this industry in the future, how do you think they can think about it at this point in time?
I think the basics of what we do in terms of help clients implement their strategies, help them prepare themselves for future changes, help them get the value out of any M&A that they're doing, help them drive growth. Those business problems aren't necessarily different. How we work them, we won't be working them 5 days in the office at our client sites typically. We may be doing them with a mix of virtual and in-person. We may be onboarding teams more virtually, during the summer. But the need to analyze data through technology is still going to be important. The need to ideate with team members, maybe through calls like this, as opposed to all in one location, is going to be there. There's definitely going to be a saving of commute time. There's going to be less air travel. That's obviously good for the planet. But that doesn't mean that we won't have people going to offices maybe in their local areas. So yeah, in September, if I had to predict, there'll be some people at client sites for certain days of the week. There'll be some people in the office for certain days of the week. There'll be some small amounts of business travel if we have to go to a critical M&A transaction, or if you have to help a manufacturing client and you have to really understand the manufacturing line so you can look at what process improvements need to be put in place. Or if you're working on an M&A transaction that requires, in M&A terms, a clean room where you need to look at certain confidential data, sometimes that, clients prefer to do that in a physical place. So I think some aspects will be changed and some will be the same. if I fast forward 24 months, I think we'll figure out a steady state of working from home, analyzing or a preferred location, analyzing sets of data, some heads down work, some thinking work, and also using our clients' locations and our own locations to do some of that more collaboration, onboarding, learning, creativity, and not to mention socializing. We've all missed socializing. We've missed human connection over the last 15 months. That is a really important part of work. It's a really important part of work in your early years. Sure, we would all agree. It's hard to do that virtually.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. You've talked a lot, you've alluded a lot to the fact that human capital is kind of the essential resource to you as a consulting firm, to the consulting industry overall. When we think about the way that PwC is thinking about its people and supporting its people, we've seen news come out that you as a firm are raising base salaries and the bonus pool across the board. So what can you share about, how that reflects PwC's priorities in terms of its people?
Yeah. So again, consistent with our purpose, if we're not taking care of our people, and whether that's, appropriately rewarding them with salary increases, giving them back the currency of time. We've also encouraged our people to take their vacation. Around 4 weeks ago, we went public with our policy where we said, if you take 1 week of vacation, we will pay you $250, up to a maximum of 4 weeks and $1,000. It was our way to make sure people prioritize themselves, prioritize their mental health. Now, I know that that's not always easy when you're working on a tough client, and there are going to be times when you have to work longer hours. Even during the pandemic, there have been times when we've had to work weekends and holidays. But PwC, as well as a number of our clients, really are focused on this mental health and the fact that people want to be paid an appropriate wage and a fair wage, and we're very fortunate and privileged in our industry that we don't have to worry about minimum wages and challenges that some other, workers do in other industries. But the currency of time, you can't put a price on that. People need time to rest and recover, whether that's Fridays in the summer, whether it's making work and life easier to say, put some time in your schedule you can block out, or no video calls on Fridays, but also making sure people actually take their vacation. Hopefully that will be an easier point this summer with more things reopening. It was a real challenge last year because people were not taking vacation, because what would you do? You would just stay in your apartment or stay at home. And, in various parts of the world, were still locked down. So we care about it. We encourage it. Our leaders need to continue to role model it. And my advice to any of my teams are, whatever you need, whether you need time off, whether you need a sabbatical, whether you need a day off, half a day off, or to block out your schedule just to kind of rest and recover, or take care of something in your personal life, you've got to kind of raise your hand and make it known to your colleagues and your clients, and then we can do something about it. That it's no longer a stigma if you're struggling with something. And giving back time has been such an important part of kind of what we see as needing to regenerate people's productivity and personal well-being.
I had not heard that news about the vacation policy yet. I think that that's an amazing ad to just that extra little incentive to say, it's not only here for you, we want you to take it, is quite a different message. When I spent a few years at McKinsey myself, and, the messaging was always that we do care about you. It felt like there were sometimes opportunities lacking for the tactical levers in which that was applied. How are we actually, supplying for these mental health support services or opportunities for mental health half days or full days, et cetera. So when you think about, those some things that you're really proud of that PwC's put in place to be these tactical levers, you've mentioned a couple, but are there any other ones that come to mind in terms of how you support your workforce?
Yeah, so we've designed an array of benefits where if people need to take a sabbatical for 6 months, we pay them, 20% of their salary if they want to take time off for whatever reason, and we kind of guarantee their job. If people want to take, unpaid leave for certain periods of time, we allow that. If people want to have the flexibility of working in a different location, we allow that. A lot of this is discretionary and discussions between managers and employees or different teams of people. If you're working on a complex M&A transaction that has a defined start and an end for when they need to close, or you're in due diligence, that's obviously much harder, but it's not impossible. The key thing is that we encourage our people to kind of raise where they need help, and we make sure that our leaders understand that there's an array of different benefits that our human capital professionals have designed for our people just to, invest and rest and recover so they can actually be better for our clients and better for themselves and better for their family members.
We'll be right back after this quick message.
Feeling stuck in your prep process? Join Black Belt. Black Belt gives you expert help. You get 8 one-hour, one-to-one coaching sessions with an MBB coach. You get access to unlimited digital materials and homework that we will assign you in between sessions to help you quickly accelerate your progress. If you need to be interview ready quickly, join Black Belt today. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.
In the work from home environment we've been in this year plus, Bhushan, many of us have felt this lack of a line, right? We're always on, and it's difficult to feel like we can disassociate ourselves from our work because there's not really a different place I'm going to. I'm not leaving the house. I'm just walking 20 feet across, to my kitchen table. So this aspect and this feeling of being kind of always on or always working culture, how do you see this? How have you seen this impact, and how do you see this moving forward in terms of the broader future of work?
Yeah, it's a real issue. For me, it's up to leaders to give permission and role model the way. So every meeting, first of all, every piece of work you do in business doesn't have to be a meeting. You can actually get heads down work done. You can produce some analysis. You can develop parts of a report or a presentation. You can analyze your company, your client strategy. You can do that with the technology through different workflows, and you can share documents, and you don't need a meeting for everything. Not every meeting needs to be a video. Now, if you're working with clients that want to see you and want to interact with you and want to ideate, that's different. But really using different tools. So what we do is we use brainstorming tools where we kind of get people to collaborate. They collaborate silently. They use virtual Post-its. It's not always talking. That's helpful as well. So in terms of the managing kind of the lines and blurring the lines, leaders have to kind of set the tone around when we're going to meet, how we're going to meet, what the different tools are, when we need to do ideation using experiential tools. We've even used virtual reality for some of our global meetings. You can't use virtual reality all the time because it's exhausting for any gamers in the audience. But also, phone calls and, going for a walk in the park or, around your neighborhood during the day, getting fresh air, some of the basics of personal well-being, we as leaders must kind of impart onto our people. But the videos have been great because we've got to know each other and got to know our family members and pets and got to peer into each other's houses. But I think we've gone a little bit too far with every call and everyone on video, even on weekends. And I see a big retrenchment around that. But again, I think setting your own boundaries, working with your leaders, understanding what works for you and for the clients that you work with are probably good starting points around that topic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You mentioned a lot about accountability and example setting, from leadership. Of course, now you are a senior leader at PwC. You alluded early on into our conversation that you had left for a while. So can you talk a little bit more about, why did you end back up at PwC, and why did you choose to invest yourself back there again?
So consulting, like any business, is you join because of firms and brands, but you really join because of the people. So the head of financial services at the time, John Garvey, and I spoke. And basically, as soon as I met him, I said, I want to work for this guy. We were building a practice around organization and human capital strategies. There was a real focus on financial services and growing that part of the business. And what he said was, we're going to invest in this business. And I'm personally going to be working with you to grow this business. And so that level of commitment from a very tenured partner who really wanted to kind of focus on this with me was music to my ears. So it felt entrepreneurial in a very big firm to build out a new practice. Subsequent to that, we've hired many people, reorganized the business, and now we're an integral part of a number of our financial services clients is, workforce and organizational strategies and are helping them. So it really came down to the people. It sounds trite, but it came back to the leadership. And hopefully I'll have the ability, and I have had the ability to influence other people's careers in similar ways. But it was really about leadership, and the culture of the firm hasn't really changed in, the 20 years that, I've been here in 2 different stints and 2 different geographies. I like the purpose. I like the culture. It aligns with me. I think every consulting firm has great traits and great people. You've got to find the one that works for you at the stage of life that you're in. And this is the right one for me for right now.
Absolutely. So being a leader still at the firm, you as you said, you have the opportunity to help, mentor folks along the way as well. I think, for a lot of the people that we work with, a difficult thing to wrap their head around is when they start and they have their, their entry level analyst or associate position in consulting, that really there's a whole new set of networking and activities that they have to do internally in that firm. They need to find their supporters. They need to find their tribe. They need to find the area of interests, that really fuels their passions. But it's not really a strategic process for many new hires. And I think that, this is an area of opportunity for many newer consultants to really start actively and strategically building their network inside their new firm, trying to find those mentorship opportunities. What have you seen that works well for early career consultants to start to kind of build their internal firm resume and find their mentorship network?
So the first thing I would say is find a leader in the firm that you respect and ask them to mentor you. I remember in my first job, I was 21 years old, didn't really know anything about business so much. And I worked for a guy called Jim Marsh, and he gave me 3 bits of advice that I keep with me, 20 something years later. The first was always ask good questions, like be very comfortable asking good questions. He said, challenge everything, whether it's this market strategy, this technology, this business process. And the third thing he said was always understand who your customers are. And very relevant when you work in business, probably easier when you work in consulting. But so many times, when someone asks you to do something, if you don't challenge, ask the right good questions and say, who's the end customer here? Is it the shareholder? Is it a regulator? Is it a business leader? Is it a member of the workforce that we're trying to develop a better benefits package or strategy for? And so surrounding yourself by good leaders and mentors who you can really learn from and who are comfortable to on the job coach you, and you feel comfortable around asking those questions that are going to make you much more curious. So yes, this is much more challenging in a virtual environment. I actually wrote an article for Harvard Business Review earlier this year around how people new into the workplace can take advantage of more virtual onboarding, and being in meetings like this, you can actually be exposed to many more executives than maybe if you were in a physical workplace. So you get the best of both worlds. But I think surrounding yourself by good people, being incredibly curious, asking great questions, doing your homework and research, and, challenging some of their assumptions about future progress, about fiscal requirements, about technology innovation, about the competitive landscape. We as business leaders love that. We absolutely love it when someone who has much less experience than us asks really, really good questions. It shows business acumen, it shows curiosity, and many times your questions are right and we haven't even thought about them.
Absolutely. It's a two-way street. It's a learning experience whole way through, right? Well, and so that was some for folks that are already in the profession and a little bit early stage. Of course, many of our listeners as well are aspiring consultants. They would love to get into and break into the industry. So from the perspective of being a leader at PwC, what kinds of folks are you trying to get into your firm? What's the culture? What's the fit that you're looking for?
It's problem solvers. It's people who it doesn't matter what your background is, whether you've kind of, studied sciences or studied the arts. In certain parts of our network, we're even taking people in that don't have undergrad degrees. In London, we're taking people in through more of an apprentice model. So it's that you have a curiosity around business and understand how the elements of business and technology and people and increasingly purpose, how they kind of mesh together and how businesses work. We've seen right now factors like environmental, social and governance, the environmental issues, climate change, resource scarcity are big issues for our businesses and our governments. It's people who are curious about the world, curious about business, curious how solutions get designed and implemented. Some of these patterns are very similar across business cycles in terms of how businesses need to reinvent, how strategies need to get reformulated, implemented, which companies win. So I think it's, come with your whatever kind of school you went to and qualifications, but come with that learning agility, demonstrate it through the right curiosity. And I think it's a great place to practice that. Again, could be for a short period of time as a stepping stone to something else. It could be for, a long period of time.
I love it. And then, at your firm, we talked a little bit about diversity, inclusion, work-life balance, but then you've also alluded to that training process that inevitably happens, through the apprenticeship, which is consulting. So in terms of professional development, how does PwC think about that and in really enhancing the skills of your workforce?
Yeah, so maybe I'll give an example of a couple of years ago. So a couple of years ago, we went on a journey to digitize our entire firm, to say we need to have digital products. We need to have much better digital engagement tools with our clients and inside our firm in terms of how we collaborate. And we realized to be a digital firm, we needed a digital workforce. So we invested heavily in what we call citizen-led learning, where we basically taught our people. For some people, it was coding. But for many of us, it was things like, how do we build automation so we can improve our work and our productivity so we're not reconciling different spreadsheets? How do we better use visualization tools as we analyze pieces of data so no more kind of rogue spreadsheets with errors in them? How do we use AI with certain parts of our data analysis, et cetera? So we went on this digital journey. How do we understand Agile as a way of developing products, software, solving problems? How do we embed design thinking as different ways of thinking? So we wanted to build digital skills, which was about automation and visualization and other aspects of digital and agile learning, into 55,000 people. We branded this program Your Tomorrow. We said everyone has the opportunity to opt in. We will not leave anyone behind. We gamified that learning experience. We engaged our people. We gave them time, dedicated time to learn that. And that was for everyone. We also had people who wanted to get more deeper into some of these digital skills and learn to code, go through a digital accelerators program, and then come back to our practices and teach the rest of us. So it was a multi-pronged approach. But again, back to our purpose, it would have been so easy for us to say, we will go hire different people with digital skills, or we'll go buy firms with just different skill sets. We actually said we have a commitment to our people today, and we want to invest in their reskilling. And I think that's a really important point as we think about big businesses in America and globally. You have great potential in your organization as you need to reskill people, whether it's around digital or whether it's around business skills or whether it's around industry skills. There's potential there for everyone. I think the more and more we can have businesses be responsible for start engaging, kind of reskilling some of their people, even if it's to produce transferable skills where they can apply in another industry. It's the ultimate part of being a purpose-driven organization. So that's one of the things we did. We also have a good culture of on-the-job coaching, where in a way that you'll get feedback. We have real-time feedback, but the Your Tomorrow program was something that we put in place to really make a step change and accelerate us into digitizing our workforce.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm sure a ton of our listeners are hearing you talk and thinking, I would love to work at a place like this, right? So when you talk with or coach folks who are intrigued in getting into the industry, what are a couple pieces of advice that you have for them about either investigating the space or even preparing for the interviews?
Have a point of view on business topics. So if I said to you, Stephanie, what do you really think about diversity and inclusion? Everyone's talking about it. Have you seen a step change? Tell me about some of the businesses that you think really excel from a diversity and inclusion perspective, whether that's because you're a customer of that business, whether you're a supplier into that business, or an employee, or you have friends there. But taking a position and being able to back it up with some examples. No one's expecting you to be an expert on, in that case, diversity and inclusion strategies, but taking a point of view that shows that you are in tune with what's going on in kind of business, you follow news cycles, and you look at lots of data, and you're comfortable and you have the courage to form your own opinions based on the data and the evidence that you cite. So it's being bold, it's being courageous, it's demonstrating a point of view, and also a very simple thing: listen really well. So if you're in an interview and you hear someone talking about future regulation around climate, if you listen really well, and maybe you've read something about firms trying to go to net zero by 2050, and whether that's an energy company, if you listen really well through the interview process and you try and connect points, that really endears you to clients, to colleagues, to leaders, because it shows you're listening. So many times I walk into sessions with my teams, my clients. Even today, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, but if I'm not listening to some of the cues, and I know it's harder to do virtually because we don't see all the aspects of body language, but if you're not listening to the cues and being prepared to respond, you kind of lose your audience, whether that's an individual or an entire team you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so how encouraging it is to hear from someone who is a top leader, who is a top expert, who's like the thought leader in terms of future of work, that if someone much earlier in their career, much more shallow in their, overall depth of expertise and understanding, that you would still want them to assert their point of view. You would still want to hear their recommendation or their thought process around that. To hear you encourage that, I think should be an encouragement to our listeners who are going through this interview process right now. A lot of folks that we work with feel a great amount of pressure and stress having to try to speak to business problems in areas that they're unfamiliar with. And it seems to be very difficult to get some folks' heads wrapped around the fact that that is the nature of the work, right? You're going to be put in lots of different team contexts and industries, functional areas, et cetera, of which you're never going to be the subject matter expert. But how can you still bring the power of you being a thought leader, still your thought process, critical thinking, et cetera, to the table? So yeah, anything else that makes you think of in terms of, how our students and prospective applicants can kind of get their heads in the right zone for this process?
Yeah, and I would say, and maybe throw the question back to you, Stephanie. In your time at McKinsey, I bet you they put you in many, many stretch roles and you felt uncomfortable, but you used some of the skill sets that you have to say, I may not have seen this problem before, but it has a certain pattern. How do I gather facts around it? How do I become very resourceful and kind of talk to the right experts? How do I formulate a hypothesis or a point of view? It doesn't necessarily have to be right, but being very comfortable that if you put yourself in a stretch role, you may not get it right, but you will learn so much. And, I'm sure, Stephanie, in your experience, you've seen similar things.
Absolutely. And that idea of getting the basic consulting toolkit down such that then you can leverage pattern recognition. You can, and see, and one of my favorite things to talk about with folks is I do truly believe that consulting is an apprenticeship overall, right? As a role, as an industry. And so, so many firms like to hire folks at an earlier stage in their career to be able to bring you up in their way of working and in their culture, because all of these are incrementally different at the different firms. And so they would much rather hire you and kind of help apprentice you into the way that they want their presentations to look, the way that they think that they're, these communication niches, et cetera. And so there's an opportunity here just for our folks to feel even more secure in the fact that they don't know everything yet, because it will come to them over time. And that pressure test of continuing to put you in different industry functional areas, et cetera, is only going to sharpen those skills and really help you gain that skill set over time.
Yeah. And the challenge here, Stephanie, is back to the point we made about listening and reading the room is you've got to be confident and have a point of view, but you've also got to be humble. Because you don't know everything, and then there'll be someone who knows more than you on how to implement this solution. So having that humility, just because you have a nice degree from a great school doesn't mean that you have a monopoly on what is right for your client or your company. Building good relationships and being well liked by your colleagues is so important as well. It's not the smartest person in the room. It's the person who can actually bring people along, make people feel comfortable, build trust and relationships. And so, the best ideas may not be the ones that always get implemented. It's the ones that feel a sense of ownership and agency, and people were co-creating that solution that is actually going to be more sustainable than maybe the best innovative idea. So, not saying it's easy to do all of those things, but you've got to be mindful of your audience, and listening and reading the room and humility and relationship building are equally important to what we've also mentioned around these stretch roles and the courage and having a point of view.
I love that. So as we are beginning to wrap up our time together, but one thing that we always love to do is just to get to know you on a little bit more of a personal level. We have an opportunity here to just ask a couple of fun questions to you, and just to help our audience kind of understand and get to know you a little bit better. But what's an accomplishment that you're really proud of, Bhushan?
I've run 7 marathons, 6 in New York. So that was a great achievement. It's so fun having your young children cheer you on, running up First Avenue and on, entering Central Park. So that's really nice. And maybe if I just add another one, because I think it's relevant here. I have not worked with governments and policymakers, and I am not a very academic person. I don't have a PhD, but something that I've been doing for the last few years is being part of a task force on the future of work at the G20. So taking my business experience and helping policymakers around the G20 think about topics like how do you think about good jobs? How do you think about responsible workforce productivity measures? How do you think about safety? For me, giving back some of the business lens that I provide to say, how do governments actually help with what we've been talking about, reskilling, productivity, better disclosures around organizational purpose, to me has been great. I love to travel. I grew up, my grandfather was a diplomat. He used to tell me his stories of traveling around the world. And I've had the great fortune of being in places like Argentina, and 2 years ago in Japan, and last January in Saudi Arabia at some of those G20 summits with the Future of Work Task Force. And it made me feel incredibly proud to be with think tanks and academics and representing the voice of business. And it's part of giving back. And it's incredibly interesting as someone who loves to travel and see different parts of the world.
Speaking of travel, speaking of wanderlust, right? The world is opening back up. What is one or two of the countries on the top of your list moving forward?
We're hoping to go to Greece with my family. We have some very good friends who live there and have access to a house in Mykonos that we can hopefully safely get there. It is open. I've never been to Antarctica. I would love to go to Antarctica at some point. Hopefully, if my wife will join me. I don't know if that's something I do in retirement or if I do sometime. One of my former colleagues actually ran a marathon in Antarctica. I'm not sure I'll be able to do that, but I'd love to go visit at some point.
Oh, well, I'm glad that you're going to be able to get to Greece this summer. That sounds lovely. I hope you have a great time with your family. And the Antarctica Marathon is something I might think twice about, but you're an experienced veteran in that area at this point. Our last fun question that we'd prepped for you, right, is are you a coffee or tea guy, and why?
Coffee. Unfortunately, I started drinking coffee when I was probably 12 or 13 years old. As an Indian guy, I should be drinking much more, and a British Indian guy, I should be drinking much more tea. But yes, I love strong black coffee. First thing in the morning, I probably drink too much of it. But yes, that's me. One of my vices.
On this side of the pond, I don't think that you likely get much slack about not being too much of a tea guy, but I can understand that for sure. I hope that you have a fantastic trip upcoming here. I'm quite jealous of that, but Greece should be a great time this summer. And we just really appreciate you being willing to take the time and speak with us about not only just helping us understand the tip of the iceberg about what the future of work means and your thought leadership in that space, but really helping us understand how PwC is thinking about different things in terms of how it prioritizes, structures, supports its workforce, thinks about its people, and these points of advice that you have for aspiring consultants in the group as well. So we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks for everything you're doing as well.
Thanks for joining us today. It was so encouraging to me to hear how Bhushan and PwC are leading the charge in helping support and develop their firm's people. If you're interested in working for a firm like PwC, do check out our information and offerings at www.managementconsulted.com, where you'll find information and resources to help you understand the consulting interview process, get the interview, and prepare for that interview. Thanks, and we'll see you again soon.